Welcome to the Atlas Leadership Academy podcast, where our goal is to offer world-class leadership and influence worldwide change. I am Marianne Owen, Executive Vice President of Atlas Leadership Academy.
And I'm William King, a Maxwell facilitator and coach. And we want to thank you for joining us today. We're definitely excited. We are sitting here to discuss the 4 stages of growth and communicating. And today we're joined by Jonathan Ingram. Jonathan is a former mayor of Murrieta. In addition to mayor, he has over 30 years in the construction industry and is also a master electrician and property construction specialist by trade. Jonathan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here.
No worries. So what do you take so far about the 4 stages of growth and communication, just from a higher level point of view, before we dive down into the topics? What's your overall opinion?
I think essential is an important thing. When you look at John Maxwell's lessons, he's worked to empower people to be able to communicate without walls. Mm-hmm. He's trying to take that firewall down and have that ability for people to sit and have a conversation and not make it personal, but make it where it has substance. And I think that's a great thing. I listen to John Maxwell's Minute every morning. So
Understood.
Enjoy it.
Now, as you know, John Maxwell just released his latest book, The 16 Undeniable Laws of Communication. Have you had the opportunity to read it yet?
No, I haven't yet, but I'm sure I'm going to get a copy today.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, within his book, in chapter 2, it discusses the 4 stages of growth and communicating. Mm-hmm. And we all know John Maxwell, he is definitely a leader through communication, and him, as well as a lot of other leaders, they preach communication is key.
Communication is essential to everything we do.
Understood.
Every day.
Yes, sir. Now, Jonathan, your experience, how important has communication has been to you? You've been the mayor of a suburban city, and now you have moved on to...
I am running for the 3rd District Supervisor position at this point.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor, and hopefully we can serve the people of Southwest Riverside County. When I got on, what I found was the paradigm from the inside looking out is far different from the outside looking in. And what most people don't understand is that you really don't have power as an elected. What you have is access with a well-articulated argument and the votes to get what you need. So it starts with having conversations with people where you don't have those firewalls, where you have the ability to kind of tap that down, set your ego aside, and have a conversation on what's in the best interest of everyone. A dear friend, when I got engaged with politics, actually gave me a stone, and it says on there, good listeners go to heaven, right? And God made us with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
That's right.
So we listen 80% of the time, talk 20% of the time, and I found the key to good communication, and I work on it diligently. It's not an easy task, is to actually keep your mouth shut and actually listen, and then you can respond accordingly.
Definitely understand that concept. Now, when you mentioned taking down the firewalls and removing your personal biases, why don't you dive deep a little bit more into removing a firewall from communication?
I think when you're trying to remove a firewall, what you have to do is afford the opportunity to listen to somebody without being critical. Being critical with compassion is a good thing, but when you're critical without compassion, it makes it hard for you to absorb what's going on, and you have to have the ability to actually be able to sit and listen and understand where someone else is coming from. And if you don't do that, then you're not hearing the conversation. And that's really a big issue today, I think, overall, when you listen to communication and communication issues.
I understand that all too well. Marianne, why don't you go ahead and take us to our first lesson?
Yes, so the first lesson is the basics of good speaking. And when we look at others in our professional group, we learn by observing from the best. We watch, we learn, and even take what we think will work for us, right? So Pablo Picasso, which is one of my favorite painters, he said, good artists borrow, great artists steal. And take that offensively, but it's not reinventing the wheel. If somebody has already perfected it, why not use it, especially if it works for yourself? Right. And then also taking opportunities to practice. So for people that want to become better at speaking and communicating, they need to realize that it doesn't just come naturally. Sometimes you do have to work at it. So my question for you, Jonathan, is can you tell us how you began in public speaking?
I've always been an individual that talks a lot. I had to learn the finer nuances of communication, though, and there's a huge learning curve with that. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose when you first get elected, or you get in a position where you have to articulate yourself. And so what you have to do is try and understand where another person's coming from and then respond accordingly. But it's also understanding the issues and knowing what you're talking about when you're responding, because an individual can be very compassionate about what they think. That doesn't make it a reality.
Right.
And so what you have to do is go through it step by step. Okay, this is. I've had people call me, "You need to call the president." I'm going, wait, that's way beyond my pay grade. Let's have the conversation on what's going on, and let's see if I have that sphere of influence and I have that ability to communicate with what you need. But it starts with listening. Everything goes back to the listening. I found that there are 3 fundamentals in being in politics, but I think, and these should apply to life, is everything you discuss comes back to the same thing. Those 3 things are listen, 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 and respond after you listen.
Yes. And that's good. I like that listen, 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 because I feel like a lot of times people listen, but they listen to respond as opposed to actively listening to understand.
Well, and we all hear what we want to hear.
True.
And we see what we want to see, whether people believe that or not. If you're on an incident where you're at a 7-Eleven and somebody's engaged or there's a robbery, you always wonder, why do the police pull people apart to have questions? You could have 5 people all standing in the same area. And all 5 people saw something differently, and they were all 5 feet apart.
Right.
So it's what you hear, it's what I hear, and then how do we come to that common denominator and go, this is what's beneficial for everyone, and where somebody feels that they walked away and they were heard, that the conversation was beneficial.
Right. Now, on the basics of good speaking, who are some of those influential speakers that you listen to and that you observed over your time in politics?
I would say Dennis Hollingsworth is one of them. He's a great public speaker.
Public speaker.
Yeah. Rick Gibbs was a colonel and a mayor when I first got on the city council in Murrieta, and he became a mentor. He just really worked on when I wasn't paying attention or where he felt that I wasn't doing, I would get the hand on the leg, right? Spoke very eloquently, always knew what he was speaking about, and showed a great deal of compassion to others, and I think that's really important. There are many. I'm blessed. I've had some great mentors.
Awesome.
And so I look and I try. Like I said, it's not a perfect art.
Right.
I'm still a human being, and there's times where I have my own opinion, but I don't let my opinion supersede what somebody else is saying, or
Right.
at least I try.
Right. One great speaker that I had the privilege of hearing throughout my time in the military, I served 10 years in the Marine Corps, and I just recently got out in 2017. But Lieutenant Colonel Schusko, he was a very, very profound speaker.
Right.
And just like you stated, whenever he got on stage, he commanded attention because he knew exactly what he was talking about.
Right.
He connected with the message. He connected with the audience, and everyone that he spoke to was completely locked in with everything he was saying. So as you began to listen to people and develop your own habits for speaking, can you tell me one thing that you picked up from the people that you watched speak over the years?
They're honest. They're open. People that have a manipulated dialogue generally have an agenda. The people that are speaking from their heart speak very openly. They're
That's
not
good.
very scripted.
That's good.
And they're saying, even if it's wrong and they're angry, they're saying what they feel at the time. And I tend to give a lot more leeway to that type of person because I believe that they're trying to be honest with you. Doesn't always necessarily mean they're right, but they work diligently on conveying their message.
Outstanding.
And that's where maybe, Toastmasters, certainly John Maxwell, the rest come into play. I'd say you want to talk about a good mentor, spend a minute every morning with the Maxwell Minute.
I agree.
And I think what he teaches is fundamentally sound because it teaches you to be a patient person.
Yes.
Because the world we live in today, it is all about patience. Like I was saying earlier, everything's done in acronyms now.
Right.
And your generation, no offense, is once, it's like I said, I had a gentleman walk up and say, sup. And I'm like, what does sup mean? And he's like, that means what's up. And I said, and you can't say what's up. And he goes, that's just easier. And so everything's consumed in these short bites. They're very quick. And there's a lot of demand on absorbing a lot with very little information.
Yes.
And I think that's where we tend to make a mistake, and we'll probably formulate an opinion based on very little data.
Right.
And that maybe that art will be perfected over the next decade.
You never know. Well, Jonathan, a lot of those short acronyms come from a lot of what young people are actually consuming today.
Right.
And what's put out in the media, things they pay attention to.
Right.
I have always heard that whatever you focus on the most, that's what you're typically going to attract within your own mind. And that's what you're typically going to put out in the atmosphere.
Right.
So if you want to be a better speaker, follow better speakers.
I absolutely agree with that. See, this is a lost art. When you look at a book here, everything is consumed now, and especially with AI in our future,
Right.
It's pretty impressive, actually, when you look at it. And
Very
it's a little
impressive.
bit scary.
A little
actually.
bit, yes.
Yeah, because it is very intelligent. And it's tough enough when, my 9-year-old granddaughter goes, "Give me your phone, Grandpa." And she's like, "Here." I'm like, "Okay, right?" And I'm
They are
just
so
gonna-
tech savvy.
They are tech savvy because they've grown up around it,
Yes.
right? And then you have my generation who's semi-savvy, but when I go, "Oh, I'm on Facebook," and they go, "That's old people stuff now. We're on Instagram, Snapchat, this and that." And I go, "Okay." So when I get an acronym or something that I don't understand, I'll ask my daughter. First time I saw LOL, I couldn't figure out what that meant, right? And she's going, "That means laugh out loud." And I say, "You can't type that out." And she goes, "No, the idea is to get it done quickly, Dad." And I'm going,
I've actually had the same conversation with my son quite a time or two.
"Yeah, have you? Okay."
I have. He's just coming to the teenage years, and a lot of times he will now start to use the speak to text function. I caught him doing it once or twice, and I said, "Son, when you text me, type it out.
Now,
Don't talk to your phone. That's lazy.
well,
You need to learn how to communicate better."
I had a child who actually texted me from upstairs and said they needed milk.
How did you handle that situation?
I said, "Go to the store and get it yourself." I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" So I know it's funny.
That
I was
is
like,
hilarious.
but I think that's what we deal with today. And
Right.
again, reading a book, sitting down and reading a book is really a lost art. And we need to get our focus back on learning to communicate with each other with compassion.
Understood.
And understand that sometimes we're going to agree to disagree, but that doesn't mean we have to hate each other. And that starts with having the mindset that you need to be able to communicate how you feel. It's not necessarily the message, it's the messenger.
Yes.
And how I say it, right? If I'm saying it rude, I've already
The
put the
delivery.
firewall up.
Right.
We're already done because we've taken a defensive position. But if I take the opportunity to just sit there and be quiet, and that was one of the things I had to work on, because I think most of us don't realize how much your face plays a role in
Yes.
your
Right.
communication skills.
Nonverbal communication skills.
Oh,
It's a huge
That's something that a lot of people don't
huge.
really understand or know about is nonverbal communication.
And so a lot of times you don't even know that you're telegraphing.
Right.
And so I had a friend who was very engaged with Toastmasters, and he said, "Do you ever watch poker on television?" I go, "No." He goes, "You must." And I said, "What do you mean I must?" And he said, "You must." And I said, "Okay." So I sat there and I watched it, and I called him and I said, "I don't understand what you mean." He said, "Well, I want you to watch their faces. I want you to watch their expressions." And they never have a tipping point. They watch their eyebrows or they wear glasses, but you cannot tell what they're thinking or doing. And it was actually a decent way of training. And the one thing that I try to be acute to, which can be difficult, especially when you're moving at a faster pace, is that the finer nuances of the English language. It's like if you went, "Can I use your bathroom?" "Yes, you can, but no, you may not," right? And people go, "Excuse me?" "Well, "May I use your restroom?" "Yes, you may." So, and it's kind of understand how
That's a
you're
big
talking.
difference.
And the problem is monitoring what you're saying.
Right.
That's an art within itself that really takes a lot of time to study.
You have to really be very cautious about what you're communicating because you can deliver the wrong message, just like the bathroom example.
Yep.
If I ask you,
Yes.
"Can I use your bathroom?"
Yes, absolutely.
You can use my bathroom, but you may not
Yeah.
use my bathroom.
Yeah, exactly.
You-
Exactly.
You have the ability to do so, but I'm not giving you permission to do it.
That's it. But right, and most people don't realize that there's these little finer nuances. And I'll go back and I'll watch something and go, oh, did I say that? Or I hope I didn't imply that. And that becomes difficult. And it's because of the mediums that we're all dealing with today, right?
That's right.
Those mediums have made it virtually impossible to do anything without it being broadcasted throughout the world in a nanosecond, right?
Right.
So you want to take the time to be very cautious about what you say and conscientious that you're not offending somebody if you're trying to accomplish something.
Understood.
Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to accomplish it, and it's going to be even harder to convey your message.
Right, you're definitely right about that. Thank you for that detailed
Yeah.
response. And once again, we're talking about the 4 stages of growth in communicating. We just went through the first point, the basics of good speaking. Marianne, please take us to the second point.
So the second point, which we've kind of touched on, but it's talking about communication outside of your world. So when people start with communication, they usually start in the smaller sphere, but then as they grow, their view widens, their audience begins to widen. And then, we have talked about some of the great communicators that you have observed and learned from. So what would it mean to, well, when you're widening your audience, how do you adjust in order to make sure that you do not offend, as we had so touched on a few minutes ago? Like, what is it that you take into account to make sure that you are speaking to everyone and everyone gets what you're saying?
You have to know your audience, right?
Right.
If you don't know your audience, you're already in trouble. I think that one of the things that I found intriguing is I had made a comment to an individual and a colleague at an event, and I said, I've acquired a taste for soul. And he said, fish? And I go, no, shoe. And he goes, why? And I said, because I put my foot in my mouth so many times, right? And so after a while, you learn who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. And you have to understand everybody has an objective or an agenda. That's just who we are as human beings. And we perceive ourselves as how we see ourselves. I had read a study not too long ago. It was intriguing to me. A dog, when it sees itself in a mirror, will bark at itself because it doesn't see itself. It sees another dog. Mm-hmm. My granddaughter the other day walked up to a mirror and kissed the mirror because she thought she was kissing another baby, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Aww.
And I know, it was sweet. And I'm sitting here thinking about this thesis that I was going over, and it occurred to me that we see ourselves based on our experiences in our life when we're looking in a mirror. Yeah. And it had said that, and so it's a culmination of everything, and you don't know what somebody else has been through.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that's why you take the opportunity. And when I was very young, my mom used to tell me, he who looks under the bed has been there himself. Mm-hmm. And I used to go, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Well, if you're looking under the bed, it probably means that you've already done that or experienced that, and therefore you're projecting something that you didn't like about yourself on someone else.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
It's heavy, right?
That's heavy.
And I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. I was like, what does that mean?
I've actually never heard that expression.
Well, she had some good ones. It was like, nothing ever gets eaten as hot as it's cooked.
What does that even mean?
Think about it. You cook something, it's in a pot, you put it on the plate,
And
you
it's
get it to the
boiling.
table. Yeah.
Right.
And it cools down, right?
That
It's
makes sense.
palatable. And
That makes sense.
And I didn't figure that out till I was 50, so don't feel bad. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But and that's where you stop and you start listening and you go, okay, that didn't make any sense as a kid. But as you get older, you start to process things differently, and I think your mind slows down, or the sponge gets full.
Yes. It's so funny you mentioned like those sayings. My grandmother had sayings like that too, and it would not hit me until I was like, an adult, 30, 35.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's what she meant by that.
I know.
One of her favorites was, you don't believe fat meat is greasy. And it's like, Grandma, what does that mean?
That's funny. I like that. So, and I think part of this is I actually enjoy communicating with people. I like to engage as much as I can. There's times where in politics you just kind of cringe and you go, okay, this is going to be tough because you're not going to make everyone happy. Mm-hmm. And the better you learn to communicate, if I were to look at people that had great communication skills, Ronald Reagan would be at the top of my list. I believe Barack Obama was very well spoken.
He was a great communicator.
He absolutely. And again, you don't necessarily have to agree with somebody's message, but you have to give his credibility to him when it came to how he communicated. And Kennedy was another just phenomenal public speaker. And some people just possess that naturally.
Yes.
Me, I talk to everyone, anytime, any place, anywhere.
Yes. I believe, and that's good. That's a good thing because that makes you relatable and friendly, and people want to listen to you because they feel seen and feel heard.
And that's kind of the key. You want to walk away from a conversation and think, well, did I provide something to them? Did they give me something in return? That's the art of great communication.
So we're talking about communicating and adding value to someone.
Absolutely.
That was on our episode last week. We talked about what makes a speaker credible, and then also speaking by adding value.
Well, and think about that. And how many times have you walked away from a conversation where you went, and you stopped and thought about what they said, and you went, well, that had some substance. That was deep.
Right.
And I think that's important when you start shortening everything up and you're trying to get to your point so fast that a lot of times you're not offering that substance
That's right.
that goes with that
Correct.
conversation.
I think it's important whenever someone is talking, after they finish talking, stop for about 2 or 3 seconds, process what they're saying before you respond.
It's called pause for effect, right?
Yep.
And
That's
it is.
exactly what it's called.
Yes.
Right. And so what you do is the great comedians and others, they will say a joke and then they will pause for the effect. And what they used to do in the older shows, they had canned laughter. And that was to build in the canned laughter after they had finished filming the show. But what they found out later on was that having a conversation and stopping and giving that gap in between gave you the ability to absorb what was just said to you or what you had just said.
Right.
And when I learned that, it occurred to me that, you just said that. And you do it once or twice, and all of a sudden it's like anything else. You may do it once, and it hurts, but you won't do it twice if you're smart. And you work on that. And I think that's a key. I think that's part. When you listen to John, he's very deliberate about what he says, extraordinarily deliberate. And I like that about him. And he talks at a pace where you have the opportunity to understand what he's saying. There are people that talk very quick.
Yes.
And you have people that talk very slow. And there's got to be that cadence in between where you have that ability to actually keep somebody's attention and not put them into a coma at the same time.
That's right.
And politicians have a tendency of pontificating. They do.
Yes.
They like to hear themselves talk.
Yes.
So.
That was one of those things I'm working on as a speaker myself, is speaking way too fast because I'm from the South. And in the South, when we get excited, we tend to speed things up and just want to get it out very, very quickly.
I think most people do. When you become passionate with something, you have a tendency of your mind starts racing, everything starts going. So, and I'm working on it. It's still a work in process with me. But when somebody's saying something that probably isn't kind or polite, I get on a picture in my mind of my grandkids, my Basset Hound or my Great Dane or my wife, anything to take you out of that where you start to get that adrenaline going, where you're going to get angry, because I think that's where you start to stuff your foot in your mouth.
Yeah.
Right.
And the one thing that I've people don't understand how permanent words are, and they are. The things that we say and do have a huge impact. We talk about violence at different levels, whether it's domestic violence or whether verbal violence.
Right.
It has a lifelong impact.
Understood.
It absolutely does. And, it's cutting to people. And sometimes people can't recover from that, especially in certain types of settings.
Absolutely, and especially when you're younger.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I spend as a young parent, because my wife and I started very early. I was 20, she was 19. So our oldest is 36, our youngest is 28. And all the mistakes you make growing up as a parent, you get much better at as a grandparent. That's why it's so much better to have grandkids, right? You have a common enemy, your children. and so I possess that manual, and it's so great talking to my granddaughter now. She's like my best friend, and we'll be sitting and talking. And I did something the other day, and she goes, "Oh, Grandpa, you're cracking." It was one of my knees, right? I said, "I don't crack. I'm crispy." She goes, "Well, bacon's crispy. Right. Everybody loves bacon." And I said, "But that's how she communicated."
Right.
And I was like, "Oh, that's really cute." She communicated with me in a loving way, and it was actually funny. But she felt comfortable enough to do that, because I think that's one of the things that we miss here.
Yes.
You can have the best communication skills in the world. If you're not comfortable sitting and having a conversation with somebody, you're wasting your time.
That's right.
Understood.
And I've seen people that interview people, that talk to people, and it just makes them want to crawl out of their skin, because you can see it. They're not comfortable,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that starts with being comfortable in your own skin and knowing what you're saying is said because you actually care.
That's right.
That's right.
I
That's
think
amazing.
That's a skill, right?
It is.
a
It
skill.
is.
Yeah.
Now, Jonathan, you spoke about this a little earlier. The third point in growth and communication is communication with different audiences. Now, you didn't immediately start off as a good speaker.
Oh, no.
At what point did you transition from being a good speaker to a great speaker to now you can speak to a very diverse crowd?
I'm a motivator.
Understood.
What I try to do is look at what somebody else needs, what they want. One of the keys to, I believe, being a good public speaker, just being somebody that can have a conversation, carry a conversation where you leave and go, you know what, I actually like that person, and that person respected me, starts with one, bringing the value to the conversation, but knowing that you've heard what they said and responding back accordingly. Mm-hmm. You make that connection almost instantly.
That's right.
And there's no one person on this planet that's the same. We're all different, and we're all imperfect. So I try not to be judgmental.
Right.
Judge not, for you shall be judged. And I don't point the splinter out in somebody else's eye when I got a telephone pole sticking out my own. Right. So
I heard that one before.
yeah, right. But it's a big deal. And I think when you can talk to people and they feel that you've established that with them and that they have the freedom to discuss that with you, it's a game changer, because it gives you the ability to talk to anyone about anything at any time. And trust me, there are things that are very uncomfortable to have conversations about.
Right.
Again, I just have a different perception of what I believe the world is and what it should be, and what we are here to do. And we're here to serve and to work with each other and to get things done. And I think a lot of times what we get are impediments that are put in place intentionally to stop communication.
Absolutely. Very true.
They don't want people to communicate with each other, and they want to separate each other. And we need to take the time to go, you know what? It's nice to have met you, and you brought substance to my life today. God bless you. And I think you do that, and people go, you know what? He may be eccentric or odd, but he's a good guy, right? And I think a lot of times that's what it is. We don't see the good in the people we're talking to, because whatever they said offended us so bad. And what I've learned is it's really hard, but to be a good communicator, you have to be thick-skinned.
Yeah.
You have to be.
You do.
Yeah. If you take things personal, you're in trouble. And that's a working. I say the best listener that I know is my wife. I've been married to her for 40 years, and every day we disagree on something, but I love her more now than the day I met her. And we have a strong relationship, but it's based on the fact that we can communicate.
That you have great communication skills.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and if I need to blow my nose, she said, go blow your nose.
That's right. Honesty. And
Exactly.
then, if we're going to disagree, we still love each other, and it's okay to disagree.
Right, and you don't, and that's one of the things that I said, and it kind of breaks my heart, because I watch people that speak, and they speak so poorly about one another, especially publicly. If I can agree to disagree with you civilly and not drag you through the mud, pull you to the side and go, you know what, my friend, this is what I see.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with somebody being critical with you, as long as it's with compassion. Because if you're critical with somebody without compassion, that's anger. And that's something you manifested that you need to look at. That's something that's bothering you.
Correct. But one thing that a lot of people need to realize when it comes to communication without compassion is that you made a conscious decision to do that.
Absolutely.
Because you became offended.
Absolutely. And that's, again, part of it is your brain works in nanoseconds, right?
Right.
So it hears something, and the moment it hears something that it may not like, that wall's already come down.
That wall came down.
Right.
Something else came up, and communication then was ineffective.
Right, and so that's where the pause comes into play, having the ability to take a deep breath, wait a few seconds before you respond to see what somebody else's response is going to be, and the telltale tick is what their face does.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes.
You'll see instantly. If you've made them mad, you're going to know.
Understood.
Yeah, for me, I'd had to learn to ask a question because I would automatically get offended. And then I've been told to where it's like you shouldn't take offense to certain things. You should get more understanding. So instead of getting offended, I'll ask like, well, maybe I heard it wrong. Let me
Right.
ask more questions to get more understanding and see where they're coming from. And then that has helped me tremendously to where
and
it's like, oh,
that's the
not what
sign
you
of an
meant.
intelligent person
Correct.
that's willing to work to bring forward a good conversation, that's an
Correct.
equitable conversation that has substance. Otherwise, well, all it is it's when I look at a lot of social media today, I call it millennial graffiti because it's mean.
Yes.
It's mean.
For
It's
no
nasty.
reason.
When I went to school, if you talked crap, you had to defend yourself when you
Right.
went there, right? And today, people do that online behind this keyboard, and they do and say whatever they want and think that there isn't a consequence.
Because there's no real consequence.
There's no real outcome.
there are real consequences.
Well, I'm
We
referring
just-
to the other person is not in front of you to defend himself.
I
against what you're
understand, but
saying.
at some point, there are consequences to everything we do in life, right?
Well, there
For-
Correct.
Right?
Well, you have to take
And we-
accountability for yourself.
Well, and we
One.
see it in schools, and we see it where this anger is manifested in these young people today because they don't know how to express themselves or they feel that they can express themselves, and then we have all these tragic things happen.
Very true.
Very,
That is
very
true.
And I think that's something that we need to learn how to teach children to communicate again. And part of that is the internet. It's really it's a great tool. It's provided a lot.
Phenomenal resource.
It is. But, today we have spell check. We have all these things that are in place. When I was a kid, we had a dictionary,
Right.
right? We didn't download our music online. We actually got on the bus, went to Tower Records, and bought a cassette.
We had a very different understanding of how we listened to music back in the day because
Right.
we had the ability to burn CDs
Yeah, there you
and
go.
create mixtapes.
I know. Look, and so I was showing my granddaughter, walked out one day and she had a big album of mine. She goes, "Grandpa, where's the CD player for this thing?" And I'm like, God, I feel old. Right? And so I showed her, I said, this is a record and this is what it is. And she goes, "No." And I said, "Yeah."
Right.
But then I showed her a CD that I had versus a VHS. And you could see going through her
She was
mind.
thinking.
She
Yeah.
started understanding. And again, that comes back to how do you create the understanding? How do you create that path of communication?
That's right.
Because if you get bored with somebody too, they shut down on you.
Correct.
Very true.
Very true.
I'm the worst with that. It's like, get to your point, right? And my wife will tell me, stop that. And I'm going, but I work on it. I'm trying, It's just that there's days where I'm not that effective with it because one of the things that's happened in our world, we are multitasking. Look at all of us who are wearing iWatches right now. Computers sit in front of us, phones around all of us.
Yep.
So everything is there 24/7. I walk into a restaurant today and I see families sitting there and there's 5 people at a table and everybody's on a phone.
I was going to ask you how many people had phones.
Oh, everyone.
All of them.
Yeah.
And they're not talking, right? So the rule is at our house, you're not allowed to be on the phone during holidays and family events. And you can see everybody's twitching and jonesing, and I'm going, oh God, he's going to shut the internet off because I'll turn the Wi-Fi off, right?
Jonathan, just yesterday, Marianne's son called her while she's at work and said, "Mom, is there a problem? The Wi-Fi is not working." Because he's on spring break.
I love it. So I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go and we're going to clear out my office. We're going to take everybody and shove them all in the office. I'm going to have a television set with a rotary dial, a phone with a rotary dial. I know. Shut the internet down. No computers.
Just gonna
And I'm
have
going to
a
write all the
table and
instructions in
And see if they
cursive.
can- yes.
I'm going to put a box of aluminum foil in there so that when they grab the rabbit's ears, because I was, when I was a kid and Neil Armstrong was orbiting the Earth, I was the remote control.
Right.
It's like, okay, John, move the rabbit's ears this way, move the rabbit's ears that way.
Yes. Change it to channel 4.
Oh,
Channel 3.
Netflix goes down and it's like the end of the world, man. And you're going, no. There's so much more out there than just that. And that was one of the things I hope that I brought. I was chairman of the Regional Conservation Authority in the Multi-Species Habitat Act, and we said, look at all these things we have. So we started engaging students and other people And it was a great thing because you could see the lights come on with environment and the things around them. And I think that enhances that process to see that there are so many other things except this. Mm-hmm. And that's something we're really going to have to work, especially with AI.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Otherwise, the next generation of children are going to be lost.
I know, because my son would definitely use it. He's like, oh, something that'll write my homework for me? This is great.
I know, and that's what, when you were saying what went through my mind when you said, I told my son not to use his dictation on his phone, is I hate autocorrect. Mm-hmm. Good grief, Charlie Brown. I don't use it because it always says something that it's not supposed to say.
Exactly.
And everything you write as a politician stays out there for perpetuity. It does not go away.
Correct.
It's there forever. It's kind of like a tattoo, and you just go, So I try to be conscientious. And the thing that when you're reading written word and something that you're typing out, there are many lines in between that. There's many, many different ways because you can hear by the tone of my voice how I'm deflecting, how I'm talking to you when we're communicating on what I feel or what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. When you just write something down in a text, it can be written, read in 30 different manners.
That's right.
That's right.
And people put the context in it that they want or what they're hearing or what they're reading.
Yes.
And that goes back to the principles of what you spoke about, is deciding how to react to a certain message. And then also what Mary Ann spoke about is asking the right question to ensure you have the right interpretation before responding.
And you always try to start a conversation. Thank you for asking. That's a good question. If I'm texting somebody at the end of whatever, I say, thank you for your time. It was nice to speak with you, so that you have their bookends when you're doing it. And you don't see that a lot anymore.
Correct.
That is very true.
That is very true. Jonathan, thank you for that well thought out response. Going on to the last stage of growth and communication, it is talking about a core principle that everyone could learn and that could apply to everyone. John Maxwell started his teaching out in the church. As we know that John Maxwell was previously a pastor, and he began speaking to a lot of people within his congregation. Now, one thing he noticed is that a lot of businessmen began coming to his conferences. So he decided to step out and teach more about leadership. So one thing he thought that was universal to everyone and he can reach more people was talking about leadership. Can you tell us about a time where you had to shift or make a change within yourself to impact a larger group of people?
I think there's many times that you do that. That's the metamorphosis that you go through as life as a human being.
That's good.
Absolutely.
As you go through different stages throughout your life, you learn that you have different types of impact. The impact when you go back and you look at photos when you were younger, I would look at stuff and I go, did I cut my hair that way? Did we actually wear bell bottoms?
Yes.
Right?
Like,
and
what were we thinking?
Ooh, what was I thinking? And so as we get older, it changes. It's like being in a relationship. You have to learn how to reinvent your relationship and love each other.
Right.
And I believe that's the same with human beings. And our values in our mind change as we get older, whether we like it or not. I think that's why understanding, having a religious background, fundamentally understanding that there's something greater than all of us becomes important, because it teaches you how to evolve, right? We all evolve. I'm quite different from when I was 18, 16, where I am today. And I look at my marriage and I know that our marriage is quite different because we had different objectives. We were raising kids. We had all this other stuff. And then when your kids move out, there's a different part of your life that you transition into as empty nesters, and you have to learn, okay, what is it that we love doing together? What's going to make our marriage stronger? What's going to make my relationship stronger? So when I go into either influence somebody or talk with someone, what I'm trying to figure out is what they need, what they want. And if I can support that, if it doesn't go against my values, then I'm going to do so.
Right.
If it does go against my values, then I have to afford the opportunity to say I don't necessarily agree and see if we can get somebody to compromise. Because I think without the art of compromise, none of this works. We can sit and have that conversation all day long. The one thing that the consummate person that compromised was Christ. He made sure that he told people, it didn't matter who he spoke to, and he wasn't judgmental. He figured his job was to give people the path. Now, whether you choose to use that path, it's up to you because God's given us free will.
Correct.
That's right.
And we have ultimate free will. So we need to make the decision on what we think is going to be the best course for our life. I hope that one day when I kneel before God that my soul is as clean as it possibly can be, and that I get to be with my family, my friends, my pets, all the things that I've acquired over a lifetime. And I think that's really important. I told a group of kids, I said, we don't get to take our monetary stuff with us when we leave. We come in this world with nothing. You leave this world with nothing. We all agree, right?
Agreed.
So it's what you do in this lifetime will echo in eternity if you've done it right, because your children are going to make sure that you're not forgotten, your grandchildren, and the deeds that you've done for people. I mean, King Tut died, they took it away from him, and they dug him up 2,000 years later and got it, right? And he took everything with him. So that's not what life's about.
That's right.
Right.
It's the impression you leave on others in what you do, and I think that starts with great conversations. It starts with good talking skills, and talking from the heart.
Yeah.
Yep.
And impacting change.
Yep.
On people's
Yeah.
lives.
Well, I think you impact change naturally if you get people to work together and agree.
Yeah.
Right, instead of
Absolutely.
fighting about what you disagree on. 'Cause
Yes.
there's plenty of things that I disagree on every day, and if I decided that I was going to put all that energy into doing that, I wouldn't get anything done.
That's right.
Right. And Jonathan, there's one last point I want you to make. Earlier, before we started the podcast, you told us a story about the ants. And I think our listeners would definitely benefit from hearing our story. Can you tell that story one more time, please?
I had a lady ask me the other day that I was campaigning with about how am I going to unite people that were all divided and that were fighting amongst each other. And I saw something on the internet, and it said that we'd taken a jar of a regular jar, filled it with 100 red ants, 100 black ants. Ants got together just fine, had no issue. It was a great environment for them. They took sugar cubes and put them in there. The ants all got the sugar that they needed. They sustained, they were fine, had no problems at all. A week later, they go over and they shake the jar. Now the ants start killing each other. The red ants think the black ants are attacking them, and the opposite for the others. And so ultimately, it's not the ants that were the issue, it's the person that's shaking the jar. It's
Right.
the agitators, and we have plenty of agitators out here in our world.
Absolutely.
And what we need to go is know we are all human beings. We are all children of God. We should love each other. That doesn't mean we have to agree with each other, because that's not going to happen. We were given free will. So our job is to make sure that we're looking at how we can communicate, and when I walk away, that I haven't made you where you want to kill me, because my personality naturally lends towards that. And so I try desperately to do that.
Right.
And I think the thing that I've learned in my 58 years is bringing a little bit of joy offers me a whole lot. And if you can get somebody to laugh,
Yes.
I love it. I love
so
it.
it was a pleasure being here today. I really enjoyed it.
Definitely. And Jonathan, I want to thank you for coming and spending such an amazing time with us and offering some valuable lessons from your time as a politician, from your time as the mayor. And then I wish you good luck in your future endeavors
Thank
as
you.
you go on and continue on.
God
with
bless
your
you.
candidacy.
It was very nice
Very
meeting
nice
you.
to meet you.